Less than an hour from Johannesburg and Pretoria, the country village of Magaliesburg nestles among mountains, valleys, rivers and indigenous woodland. Here you'll find country guest houses, lodges and mountain bike and horse trails. On the way to Magaliesburg, you will also pass the Tarleton International Raceway, the home of South African drag racing.
The sprawling complex again hosted the RFS Magalies 400, the final round of the ABSA Off-Road Championship, with overcast skies and a light drizzle greeting competitors as they went through documentation and scrutineering procedures.
With a number of championship issues still to be decided in both the production vehicle and special vehicle categories, there was an air of tension in the pits. The weather and its effect on the route was another talking point as teams went about preparing for the Donaldson Prologue to determine start positions for the race. The ABSA Off-Road Championship is the most competitive of its kind in the world, and the RFS team runs 2 cars in the Premier SP class. RFS also provides backing to other privateer teams, with Chief Executive Officer Chris Deploy looking towards more expansion in 2011.
We had a wonderful year this year, above our own expectations with the BMW. We hope that next year it will be more interesting with another BMW coming to the scene. Yeah, we're quite into motorsport and with a bike econo run, and we from RFS are quite excited to be involved in motorsport as such.
In days gone by, Andre Kok was a top driver. His son has followed in Dad's footsteps, with Malcolm Kok set to make his debut in a Toyota Hilux in the Premier SP class.
Ja, ek het gisteraan so om die blok gereis. I haven't practiced a lot. But yes, we can't practice on the tar road, so we must practice on the gravel, but we're looking forward to it. It's nice to have a 6-speed gearbox, so we'll see what happens, and no, we're looking very much forward to it.
Another driver following in Dad's footsteps is teenager Lance Woolridge, who was leading the Class E Drivers' Championship. A back injury forced him to miss the RFS Magalies race, with Team Ford calling on former champion Manfred Schroeder to step into the breach.
Yeah, back in the same car we raced a couple of years ago. We did 3 seasons in it, won a Class D championship in it and won a Class E championship in it. And then Jack Peckham raced the same class and also won Class E in it. So unfortunately, with Lance out, it would have been the 4th championship for the same car.
With a 25-point lead in the production vehicle overall championship, Chris Visser and Jalpie Baardnos could not be beaten. The fight for second was between Hannes Grobler and Henny ter Steege and Duncan Voss and Rob Howie, with some good battles going behind them.
I think being first to the buckies is certainly going to be an advantage, because I think the route's just going to get a bit worse. And we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully the rain holds up, and I think it's going to be a very interesting race this weekend, because once again, with the damp ground, there's going to be no dust, so I think the race tomorrow is going to be pretty much like a prologue today.
The Donaldson Prologue to determine grid positions for the race the next day is a race within a race. The top 5 seeded crews draw for starting places, and with a good grid position for the race imperative, prologues provide plenty of action. They can also ruin a team's bid for glory.
The Donaldson Prologue was run over a 60-kilometer course that was to prove very tricky. It took competitors along the R45 Krugersdorp Magalies Road and through Maloney's Eye into a new section in the Blowbank area.
It is no secret that a recipe for success in off-road racing is never to get out of the car. Not having to get out of the car means a clean run, and that is exactly what happened when Team Castrol Toyota pair Duncan Voss and Rob Howie romped home 1 minute and 44 seconds ahead of RFS Toyota pair Christian Deploy and Henk Janse van Vieren. Late in the prologue, the young Pretoria crew ran into a power steering problem, and they were only 5 seconds clear of Free State crew Lodebrain and Rian Greiling in the Rubicon Racing Ford Ranger.
The Free Staters were only 3 seconds ahead of new champions Chris Visser and Jalpie Baardnos, who had been racing together since 1998 and who had the luxury of knowing the overall championship was already in the bag. Although the overall title was done and dusted, the SP Class Championship was still up in the air, and veterans Hannes Grobler and Henny ter Steege could catch Visser and Baardnos. Grobler and Testego were pushing hard in the RFS BMW X3 and sailed past the Team Castrol Toyota of Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton, who were battling with an engine misfire. There was another good result too for the Free State, with Bloemfontein-based George Barkhuizen and David van Wyk setting the 6th fastest time in the AIM Toyota Hilux.
There was plenty of support for teams along the Donaldson Prologue route, with yet another Free State pair forcing their way into the top 10. Peter Ruthven and Rudy Brits had run into good form in the last couple of events and were looking solid in the Rubicon Toyota Hilux. Malcolm Koch and Johan Berger were also looking the part in their first SP class outing, while Terence Marsh and Bucks Carolyn attracted a small but vociferous band of supporters.
Although nearly 4.5 minutes down on the leaders, the Regent Racing Nissan Navara was sounding healthy, with Marsh and Carolyn finishing the prologue 7 seconds quicker than the sister Regent Racing car in the hands of Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson. Off-road racing is a family-orientated sport, and Marsh, Whitehouse and Carlson are all brothers-in-law, which leads to some friendly rivalry amongst the trio. A win on the Sun City 400 in the middle of the season gave former South African special vehicle champ Marsh temporary bragging rights.
The first of the Class D entries was the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux in the hands of championship contenders Dion Venter and Ian Palmer. The area around Magaliesburg is a favourite with glider and microlight pilots, and activity in the sky provided a little variety for amateur photographers. Cliff Weichelt and Johan Smallberger did a little low flying of their own in the N1 4x4 Toyota Land Cruiser to finish second in Class D. Former Class E champion Manfred Schroeder, deputising for the injured Lance Woolridge, showed he had lost none of his skill. Schroeder and Ward Huxtable set the pace in Class E in the Team Ford Ranger, with Schroeder brought into the KwaZulu-Natal team in an effort to help Huxtable clinch the Co-Drivers' Championship.
Second place in the prologue in Class E went to Hein Moelman and JD Volfart in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux, with the sister car of Picky Labaskatni and Rikus Erasmus dropping out with gearbox problems. Third in Class E went to the Rubicon Racing Ford Ranger of Gerald Leroux and Willem Pretorius, with the pair finishing just ahead of Class D crew Jack and Cyril Westhuizen in a Land Rover.
Back in the pits, technical personnel were busy restoring their chargers back to full health in readiness for battle on the morrow. While they toiled away, drivers and co-drivers compared prologue notes.
Definitely, yeah, we had some troubles in the beginning, but power steering problems. Yeah, we just try to keep it neat and tidy, and yeah, I think it worked out for us.
Yeah, I must say it's quite different than last year. Much more tricky and much more sliding, and especially this first part of it was not so, just plenty of rocks. So you had to keep in the road, and it was quite slippery next to the river bit.
We had a very good run. I made one error where we turned in front of a fence instead of going around it. Probably lost 30 seconds there, but we've got a 1 minute 50 lead in class. I'm very happy with that. Car ran like clockwork.
For ABSA executive Wessel Steffens, a ride alongside Clint Weston on the prologue in the Regent Racing Nissan Hardbody turned into an adventure. At a tricky river crossing, the Nissan gently toppled onto its side with no damage to either driver or passenger. Luckily.
Whole package, as they say, the platinum package. Rolled the vehicle into a river, hung upside down on the harness. Fortunately, both Clint, the driver, and myself managed to get out easily. And helicopter flipped back to the pits. It's about as good as it can get.
With other championship issues out of the way, most of the attention in the special vehicle category was on the winner-take-all shootout between championship leader Shamir Variawa and Siegfried Rousseau and the father and son pairing of Kali and Quinton Silwalt. With just 6 points between the crews, it was a cliffhanger. To make it more interesting, a win for the Silwalts and a second for Variawa and Rousseau would see the two teams tied on points with 3 wins and 2 seconds each.
Our strategy is as follows. Today in the prologue, the rain obviously changed a lot of things. So you can't, if you're in front, you can't use the dust to your advantage for tomorrow. We're going to go hard in the prologue. And if our hard is not enough, then we're going to go harder tomorrow. So let's see what happens on today, and then we'll take it step by step.
Over in the Sulwalk pit, all was cool, calm and collected. Cully Sulwalk won his first SA championship in the 90s with brother Herman and scored again in 2007 with son Quinton. As far as Quinton was concerned, all the pressure was on Variawa and Rousseau to produce.
I feel that we're still chasing. I think all the pressure's on Shamir. We're going to go flat out. We're going to try and win it. So, yeah, hopefully we can pull it off. We'll see what happens.
Back in action after a lengthy layoff was Bloemfontein-based David White, who would be making his Class A debut in an ex-Evan Hutchison bat, now in Rubicon Racing colours.
Negotiations with Evan Hutchinson, and he helped me, and we got a deal together. I traded in my old Class P car and I bought the spec free, and we're going to go for Class A. Just take it slowly today, and then next year we'll see what we can do towards the championships.
A winner-takes-all situation in the Special Vehicle Overall and Class A Championship. The Class B and Class P Championships had already been settled, and for the protagonists, it was pistols at dawn.
Yeah, it's always been our home. It's a fantastic car. You never really, you might go off the route, but you never really lost. So you've always got a general direction. It's going to be tough. It's always tough first on the road. You're the first one to the different corners and to little tricky areas. So there's no doubt you're going to lose a certain amount of time by being first on the road. We are the only four-wheel drive car in our class, and apparently the conditions are quite wet and slippery out there. So although we've got a slight disadvantage of being first, I suppose we've got a small advantage of running the four-wheel drive. Yeah.
It's SuperSport's #1 hit golf show, Super Golf. Sensational. Get down to scratch with professional golfing tips. Keep up to date with the latest news and results, including the ladies, junior and amateur circuits. Discover the best local and international courses and exclusive interviews from the world's best players. That's Super Golf every Wednesday evening, live and exclusive to SuperSport, and proudly sponsored by Telkom Business.
The skies were still grey overhead as the Special Vehicle Brigade waited for the start of the Donaldson Prologue. The route and how much water would be encountered had been a talking point in pit lane throughout the morning. With the tension slowly starting to build, competitors were about to find out for themselves just how wet or dry it was out there.
Outgoing Drivers' Champion Evan Hutchison and off-road motorcycle star Daryl Curtis drew #1 on the road, and the role of Pathfinder would be a new experience for Curtis. Second on the road with a Century Racing pair of Colin Matthews and Alan Smith, with them having a reputation as prologue specialists.
No one was prepared for the Special Vehicle surprises conjured up on the Donaldson Prologue. The fastest time went to Class P crew Archie Rutherford and Mike Lawrenson in the Regent Racing Gymco. And just on 2 minutes behind them and leading Class A were Keith Dutoy and Ashley Thorne in the White Star Racing batch. Carnage out on the route saw Class B leaders Kutsia Labuskagli and daughter Sandra in the Race Sonics bat, third overall. And as a trifecta bet, you could have named your own odds. With the form book turned upside down, the first of the more fancied crews were Evan Hutchinson and Daryl Curtis in the Motorride Revo 1 with four-wheel drive.
Just 2 seconds separated Hutchison and Curtis from Marius and Yolinda Fourie, with a PHB bat second in Class P and only 2 minutes and 20 seconds behind the leaders. Exactly a minute behind the Fouries were Guy Henley in only his second outing and experienced Warwick Goosen in the Century Racing Gymco. Charging along behind the bat were Jimmy Zahos and Stefan Kutsia in the Cobalt Racing Porter. They hit a river crossing at speed, and for more than half an hour, that's as far as they went.
Water in the electrical system temporarily rendered the Porter hors de combat and blocking the road. Then along came Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell with the KwaZulu-Natal crew trying to push the stranded Porter out of the way.
Photographers just love water crossings, and for them, this was meat and drink. Stefan Kutse eventually did a little road clearing, and with the Cobalt Porter now no longer blocking the road, Gibson and Campbell were able to squeeze past and rejoin the race, with the KZN team finishing 7th overall and 4th in class.
Gingerly feeling their way along a tricky section of route were Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar in the Century Racing CR2.
Teamwork is an essential ingredient for success in off-road racing, with the Century Racing pair third in Class P behind Rutherford Lawrenson and the Fouries. Also going along steadily was Jacques Wheeler and Dani Stassen in the Lab 88 Bat, previously campaigned by the late Bevan Berthold. They were being chased by KZN's Dino Scabanti and Justin Fuchs, who were having an adventurous run in the Bat. And behind them, Nick Gosler and veteran driver and co-driver Richard Carolyn were having their best prologue of the season in the Men's Health International Zarco.
There was an international flavour to the RFS Magalies 400 with brothers Eduardo and Ricardo Agazi from the Democratic Republic of the Congo out in a South African-built Zarco Magnum that had been modified to Dakar Rally specifications. Behind them, the prologue had turned into a disaster for championship leaders Shamir Variawa and other fancy championship frontrunners. Sections of the route were particularly slippery, with the powerful Class A cars battling to find grip and traction.
Variawa and Rousseau were not the only ones to suffer. Nick Harper and Kevin Hume were having the same problems in the big Atlas Copco Bat. Hume is normally crew chief for the Atlas Copco team, but has stood in for the injured Ryan Harper for most of the season and has gone through a baptism of fire.
A river crossing combined with a steep incline was causing all sorts of problems for fancy teams who were expected to dominate the prologue, while Shamir Variawa and Siegfried Rousseau were also hit by a bizarre incident when a guinea fowl flew into the cockpit of the Total Porter. Championship contenders Cully and Quinton Sewald were also not making much headway, with the early starters all running into the same problems.
The guinea fowl episode was to have a sequel, and when Siegfried Rousseau finally managed to throw the bird out of the car, it also disposed of his road book. The second Solwart father and son team of Herman and Wichert were not to be spared and joined the string of cars who set off at the front of the field and who were now gradually dropping down the pecking order. There were times when the efforts of frontrunners to fight their way up a slippery incline resembled one of those old Keystone Cops film clips, with everyone running around in frantic circles.
First up was Nick Harper with co-driver Kevin Hume out the Atlas Copco Bat and an interested onlooker. No go, and for the moment Harper had to admit defeat.
Next up to have a go were Collie and Quinton Sewald in the elegant Fuel Bat. But it wasn't that elegant either.
The pair almost made it when the Bat ran out of traction and they rolled back down the slope. As the Bat rolled backwards, Herman and Wichert Sewald launched the Sewald Racing SVR up the hillside, closely followed by Cully and Quinton and Class P champions Johan van Staden and James Rousseau, who chose a different route up the steep incline in the Atlas Copco Bat.
All these shenanigans meant that the Special Vehicle Championship was wide open. After a first prologue win for a Class P crew, Archie Rutherford was full of smiles.
My prologue went all right. Everybody else seemed to have an eventful prologue, but we had no hassles. We got up that infamous hill that everybody got stuck on, and we kept it together, and one or two wrong slots, but that was par for the course, and yeah, we did well.
Sometimes a lot of power is to your advantage, but sometimes a lot of power you also doesn't compensate for the traction. You have less traction with a lot of power, so the lower powered cars, they seem to go better in the wet.
There was a great deal of interest in the pits in the much modified Zarco Magnum of the Agazi brothers. The car was built in South Africa and then modified to meet Dakar Rally specifications, with the Agazi brothers making their first appearance in the ABSA series.
We were in Dakar before, in Tunisia for a World Championship, and we usually race in Congo and the other place in Central Africa. This is the first time for us to come in South Africa to race, and we must learn before, because there is a big difference between here and Congo.
Unlike the previous morning, it was bright and sunny on race day. The prologue results were still a talking point, with Special Vehicle Championship leaders Shamir Variawa and Siegfried Rousseau starting 37th on the road, with Cully and Quinton Silwat 2 places behind them. In the production car category, there were only 3 minutes separating the first 8 cars. Special Vehicle Prologue winners Archie Rutherford and Mike Lawrenson had 4 production vehicles ahead of them and another 4 behind them. It was an interesting situation for Rutherford and Lawrenson, with all the crews thankful that there had been no more rain in the area overnight. Large crowds at the start and along the route were looking forward to an interesting day, with the Team Castrol Toyota pair of Duncan Foss and Rob Howie looking for their second win of the season.
We had a lot of rain yesterday. Today it seems to be a bit clearer, so the route should be less tricky today than yesterday. But yeah, you know, there's a big pack following us today, so hopefully we can do the job.
With the driver based in Botswana and the co-driver living in Lesotho, the White Star Racing team is a mini League of Nations. Keith Totoy and Ashley Thorne were the first Class A car on the road, with Botswana-based Totoy over the moon with a career first.
I was overwhelmed, actually. I didn't expect us to be up there. But yeah, most probably our luck has turned for the change, so we'll be there.
There is always a cheerful atmosphere at the start of an off-road race, but there's also an undercurrent of growing tension as the countdown progresses. Drivers and co-drivers each have their own way of dealing with pre-race nerves, and most have their own pre-start rituals. With a gap of 1 minute 44 seconds between them and the next car, Duncan Foss and Rob Howie had a comfortable start on the rest of the pack, with dust unlikely to be a major factor out on the route.
The Team Castrol Toyota Hilux quickly built up a head of steam and was well down the road by the time Christian de Plooy and Henk Janse van Vieren took off after them in the RFS Toyota Hilux. The stadium section of the route made use of the old Talton motocross circuit, which in days gone by saw some monumental battles between legendary riders like Grant Mabin, Charlie Tison and American Jim Tarantino.
De Plooy and Janse van Vieren set off only 5 seconds ahead of Loudebrain and Rian Greiling in the Rubicon Ford Ranger, followed in quick succession by Chris Visser and Japie Badenhorst and Archie Rutherford with Mike Lawrenson in the Regent Racing Jimco. Chris Visser and Badenhorst were looking to make a quick move on the Rubicon Racing Ford, and spectators seated on the old motocross grandstand were treated to some spectacular racing. The veteran pair of Hannes Grobler and Henny Terstegen started behind Archie Rutherford and Mike Lawrenson, and top of their agenda was to quickly find a way past the Regent Racing Jimco and then set off after the production cars ahead of them.
Grobler and Terstegen took the RFS BMW to a podium finish on the 4x4 Megaworld 400 in only its 3rd outing, and the highly experienced crew then stunned the off-road world with a win on the Toyota Kalahari 1000 Desert Race. A 4th on the Heman Auto 400 gave the RFS team a slim chance of beating Chris Visser and Japie Badenhorst to the post in the SP Class Championship. It all came to nothing when a damaged turbo sensor forced Grobler and Terstegen into an early role as spectators.
Back at the start at Talton, little cameo performances were unfolding in the old motocross bowl. The Rubicon Racing Toyota of Peter Ruthven and Rudy Brits was chased by the Toyota Hilux of Malcolm Koch and Johan Berger, and hurrying after both of them were Keith Totoy and Ashley Thorne, with race cam footage putting you right in the driver's seat.
Competitors would complete 2 loops of the 180-kilometer route, with the opening section roughly following the prologue route and the R24 and R509 Magalies Costa Road.
With clear path ahead of them, Duncan Foss and Rob Howie were able to push hard in the Team Castrol Toyota Hilux. Being first on the road cast them in the Pathfinder's role, but the first 60 kilometers followed the prologue route and would not present any major problems. Although it had not rained overnight, there was still plenty of water around, with slippery patches to catch out the unwary.
The RFS Toyota pair of Christian de Plooy and Henk Janse van Vieren picked up their first podium finish of the year on the Himan Auto 400, and second on the prologue set them up for another good result. The pair almost came unstuck at the river crossing, which caught out Clint Weston and ABSA executive Wessel Steffens the previous day, and the Toyota almost slid down the riverbank.
A little further back, Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst moved into third when they picked off Loudebrain and Rian Greiling in the Rurikon Ford Ranger. For the new champions, the targets up ahead were now Christian de Plooy and Henk Janse van Vieren in the RFS Toyota Hilux, and race leaders Duncan Voss and Rob Howie in the Team Castrol Toyota. With the cars now running close together, Visser and Badenhorst and de Plooy with Janse van Vieren were playing a little game of tag with race cam footage from first one car and then the other, keeping tabs on what had turned into a close battle, with the RFS car just managing to hold on to second place.
The battle up front was starting to get interesting, while behind the leading trio, there was also close racing with the Rubicon Ford Ranger of Loudebrain and Rian Greiling fourth on the road and running ahead of Archie Rutherford and Mike Lawrenson in the Regent Racing Jimco. Rutherford and Lawrenson had made a steady start, but they were still the special vehicle meat in a production car sandwich. Chasing after the Jimco were George Barkhuizen and David van Wyk, who had also made a solid start to the day in the AIM Toyota Hilux.
At the front of the field, the leading cars had again built up a head of steam, all except for race leaders Duncan Voss and Rob Howie. The Team Castrol Toyota was now limping along minus power steering and was soon overhauled by the RFS Toyota Hilux, with Christian de Plooy and Henk Janse van Vieren leading a race for the first time this season. At a road crossing, Voss and Howie passed on the bad news to Team Toyota technical crew, with their hopes of a win right out of the window. Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst were second and trailing the RFS Toyota pair by only 18 seconds.
Service crews and backup teams at road crossings anxiously waited for their cars to appear on the scene, with the leaders now running together. After an overshoot, Christian de Plooy and Henk Janse van Vieren managed to backtrack and nip ahead of Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst. The race was on. And there was also plenty of action a little further back, with Loudebrain and Rian Greiling under serious pressure from George Barkhuizen and David van Wyk, with Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton charging through the field in the second Team Castrol Toyota Hilux. Taylor and Houghton had moved ahead of Archie Rutherford and Mike Lawrenson, who still led the special vehicle category.
The Rurikon Toyota Hilux of Peter Ruthven and Rudy Brits was at the front of a second wave of cars and ran into a spot of bother at the now notorious river crossing that almost claimed the RFS Toyota earlier in the day. Ruthven and Brits were well and truly stuck when Malcolm Koch and Johan Burger arrived on the scene to find the road blocked by the Rurikon Toyota.
It was clear that Ruthven and Brits were going nowhere without a little outside assistance, and behind them cars were starting to back up, with Keith Dutoy and Ashley Thorne and the Regent Racing Nissan Navara of Terence Marsh and Bucks Carolyn lining up behind Koch and Burger. The Rubicon Toyota was finally pulled out of trouble by marshals, and Koch and Burger went on their merry way to be followed by the White Star Racing Bat. Keith Dutoy decided the best way to tackle the obstacle was to charge into battle. It worked, but Terence Marsh and Bucks Carolyn weren't taking any chances and decided on a more cautious approach and sailed through the obstacle with the PHB bat of Marius and Yolinda Verree right on their heels. The Verrees were sandwiched between the Regent Nissan Navaras of Marsh and Carolyn and Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson, who had made steady progress through the morning.
Sun City 400 winners Terence Marsh and Bucks Carolyn had also made steady progress, but were passed by the Flying Motorride Revo 1 of Evan Hutchison and Daryl Curtis, who were on a charge. The Motorride pair lost time sorting out a mechanical gremlin early in the day, and once past Marsh and Carolyn, it didn't take them long to dish out the same treatment to Peter Ruthven and Rudy Brits. Marsh and Carolyn also went right past Ruthven and Brits, with the race cam in the Nissan Navara capturing all the action.
With some hectic battles developing throughout the field, there had also been a change in pecking order in Class D. The N1 4x4 Land Cruiser of Cliff Weichelt and Johan Smallberger had found a way past prologue winners Dion Venter and Ian Palmer in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux. Venter and Palmer needed only to finish to win the championship and, not surprisingly, had opted for a cautious approach. Meanwhile, back at the now infamous river crossing, Jacques Wheeler and Danny Stassen were in trouble in the Lab 88 bat and eventually disappeared into the river.
While the aptly named Jacques Wheeler and Danny Stassen were playing around in the river, the bat driven by Dino Scribanti and Justin Fuchs had slipped past, and it was now the Zarco of Eduardo and Ricardo Argazi that needed help, with the Ital Motors car also blocking the road.
The Lab 88 bat was running in memory of the late Bevan Berthold, who was a fiery character, and Bevan would have been proud of Jacques Wheeler and Danny Stassen as they made a brave attempt to climb the riverbank. They almost made it before slipping back into the water, while marshals turned their attentions to the Argazi brothers, who also nearly disappeared into the river.
The Argazis were finally hauled out of their predicament, but the drama was not yet over. The father and son team of Willem and Dana Vos were in a hurry in the Fossies Toyota Hilux and gave the men's health Zarco of Nick Gosler and Richard Carolyn a solid whack up the backside in an incident that had later repercussions, with the Toyota retiring with a damaged radiator. For the moment, all was well with the Rustenburg pair, who then joined a gaggle of cars waiting for their turn to tackle the river crossing that was causing everyone so much grief.
The Lab 88 bat was still parked in the river when Class E leaders Manfred Schroeder and Ward Huxtable safely negotiated the trouble spot, with the Team Ford Ranger closely followed by Guy Henley and Warwick Goosen, and the Transcorp Ford of brothers Graham and Trevor Leith. Class B leaders Kutsia and Sandra Labiskachny were also part of the group in the Racesonic Zarco. Next up were the Fossies, who were heading for eventual retirement, and behind them were a gaggle of Class P cars that included Goslar and Carolyn, the Century Racing CR2 of Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar, and the Atlas Copco bat of Johan van Staden and James Rousseau.
Fast open sections were proving to be few and far between on the RFS Magalies 400, and it was one of these that Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar took the Century Racing CR2 ahead of the Leith brothers in the Transcorp Ford Ranger. The futuristic-looking CR2 was designed and built in South Africa to specifications that would allow it to enter the Dakar Rally, the car previously driven by Corbett's father Ernest, who's now retired from racing. While the CR2 was belting along at a fair clip, progress was a little slower for Gerald Leroux and Willem Pretorius in the Roacon Ford Ranger. The pair took a class win on their debut earlier in the season and were running second in Class E.
Back to the infamous river crossing, and almost out of nowhere, the Lab 88 bat popped out of the trees. Jacques Wheeler and Danny Stassen had been underwater, so to speak, for 35 minutes and had some hard work ahead of them to make up for lost time. The pair started the day 22nd on the road and had now been relegated to the back of the field.
They say it's the world's most grueling sport. So we thought we'd make it a little easier for you. Join us each week as we bring you up-to-the-minute news on current events. This is going to be a superb. Tips from the pros, and review the latest technology to keep you ahead of the pack. Watch Super Cycling every Tuesday and enjoy the journey without the pain. Only on Supersport, and brought to you by NetScheme and MTN.
We can go there over bridges, under bridges, over bridges, and when we get wet, we have to dry. City high, city low, gotta go, city low, gotta go. If I stand still like a shark, I'll die. When I fall, I have to rise. Honey,
Life's better connected. The new Ford Fiesta.
This is our house. I love our house.
And our car. My dad and his favorite toy. My best friend. Titan is his name. Our neighbor's daughter, I call her Blue. And the best granddad in the world.
Be a Titan for life. Stay true to your blue. Once a fan, always a fan. Nashua Titans.
The route for this year's RFS Magalies 400 included new sections that offered crews a stiff challenge. It was a tough and demanding course and passed through the Syferbult, Carltonville and Ventersdorp areas before heading back to the designated service point at Tartan International Raceway. As in previous years, the route was spectator-friendly with excellent viewing points that gave race enthusiasts a close-up view of all the action and then more.
At the front of the production car field, there had been significant changes. Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst now led in the RFS Toyota Hilux and look to be on course for their 4th victory of the season. But the big movers were Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton, who started 12th on the road and 9th in class in the Team Castrol Toyota and moved to within a minute and a half of the leaders. Lodebrain and Rian Greiling were still a solid third in the Rubicon Ford Ranger and were locked in battle with Archie Rutherford and Mike Lawrenson, who lost a few seconds when they stalled the Regent Racing Jimco.
There are always a few anxious moments when a car does not start at the first time of asking, but Rutherford and Lawrenson were soon on their way again, thankfully.
It helps to get on TV when you know a cameraman who has connections, but more important issues were starting to emerge in the RFS Magalies 400. The problems encountered by expected frontrunners on the prologue had thrown the form book out the window, and the first 3 cars in the special vehicle category were all Class P runners, with Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar being chased by Class P champions Johan van Staden and James Rousseau, who started 30th on the road and 12th among the specials. Van Staden and Rousseau were the first Class P crew to win an ABSA national event outright, and more history was in the making.
Malcolm Koch and Johan Berger were having a fine first outing in an SP class vehicle, and a Mexican wave in the middle of the bush also helps to get you on TV. Peter Ruthven and Rudy Brits in the Rokon Toyota Hilux had also made a good recovery after their river crossing woes, but were having to fight to stay ahead of fellow Free Staters George Barkhuizen and David van Wyk in the AIM Toyota Hilux. The 2 Free State crews moved up a notch or 2 when Christian de Plooy and Henk Janse van Vieren ran into some bad luck, with the RFS Toyota pair having to stop to sort out a puncture, an occupational hazard on an off-road race.
At the front of Class A and 4th overall among the special vehicles, all was well with Keith Totoy and Ashley Thorne, with the White Star Racing back being chased by Christian de Plooy and Henk Janse van Vieren in an RFS Toyota now fitted with 4 fully inflated wheels. A little further back, there was a tremendous performance from Guy Henley and Warwick Goosen in the Century Racing bat, with Henley driving in only his 2nd off-road race. The pair were running in the top 5 and were 2nd in Class A. There was also a great deal of interest in the car behind them. Cully and Quinton Sewald had skied through the field in the Elegant Fuel bat and now had one hand on the title. Championship leaders Shamir Variawa and Sigrid Rousseau were out of the race with suspension damage to the total porter. Right on the heels of the Sewalds were Nick Harper and Kevin Hume, and behind them, Nick Gosler and Richard Carolyn had opened a few eyes in the men's health Zarko.
It's not very fast, but it's puncture-proof and the tyre wear is good. Farming activity went on unhindered by an off-road race, with Regent Racing pair Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson looking to make up time before the designated service point. Class B leaders Kutsia and Sandra Lebeskachny pulled over to let them through, with Whitehouse and Carlson looking to regain confidence after losing the longest reliability streak in the ABSA series. Marius and Yolinda Fourie were also looking to make up ground, and after starting 4th in Class P, the husband and wife pairing had dropped back 1 place.
The father and daughter combination of Kutsia and Sandra Labeskachny were still comfortably ahead in Class B in the Race Sonic Zarko, but there had been another change in Class D. Dion Venter and Ian Palmer were back in the lead in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux after early leaders Cliff Weichelt and Johan Smallberger retired the N1 4x4 Toyota Land Cruiser with transmission problems. A strategically placed jacuzzi was a good way to cool off, but it was hot work in the cars. Manfred Schroeder and Ward Huxtable were still in charge of Class E in the Team Ford Ranger, with Huxtable on course to win the Co-Drivers' Championship. Bez Besadenhout was second in Class B in the Adenco Bat, and after winning the championship with daughter-in-law Lindy, was now sharing the car with son Etienne.
The first car into the pits at the designated service point was the RFS Toyota Hilux of newly crowned 2010 production car champions Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst. They started the day in fourth place, and Badenhorst was a little surprised to be in the lead.
Well, we're leading, and it was unexpected. Low made some space for us, so we could pass him, and Christian had a flat, unfortunate. Not sure about Duncan. Duncan was on it open, and something's wrong. Anthony is charging, so he's coming out chasing us, so nice. Looking forward to the second.
It's been a bit frustrating. We've last 100 Ks, we've had a low fuel pressure problem on left-handers, so we're sitting behind Chris but can't do anything about him. Every time we turn around a left-hander, the engine dies. So just been working to get into service. Hopefully the team can fix it now in the service, and we can attack Chris on the second lap. So we're still staying in touch, so we've still got a good chance out there.
Nee, is net 'n probleempie, maar miskien hou die brieke ons terug sonder brieke ry.
The first of the special vehicles into the DSP was the Regent Racing Gymco of Archie Rutherford and Mike Lawrenson. The Class P crew had led throughout the morning with no problems.
It's going fine. It's brilliant. There's just a little tricky, slippery section in the beginning. Otherwise, it's brilliant.
We had a bit of a wrong start this morning. A lot of guys got stuck in the mud, and about 20 cars got past us, but I think we're back up. Must have passed about 18 of those cars so far, so we're going well.
Just learn. The route is strong. I have to check very well where I have to go, because it's very different between my country and here. But I'm happy.
Need a new DSTV remote? Well, now it's just a click away. Simply visit the DSTV website, browse through the various decoder accessories on offer, make your pick, and click.
Peterson!
We'll deliver your order directly to your doorstep, saving you time, money, and the hassle of waiting in line.
I can't believe I haven't done this sooner.
DSTV, so much more to make life easier for you.
The Barbarians are coming. The Springboks take on the Barbarians on the 4th of December. Live and exclusive on your World of Champions.
RFS Magalies 400 had produced one surprise after the other, and there was little doubt that there would be a few more shocks on the final 180-kilometer loop. On the production vehicle front, it looked like a straight fight between the RFS Toyota Hilux of Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst and the similar Team Castor Toyota entry in the hands of Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton. Archie Rutherford and Mike Lawrenson were in control of the special vehicles and looking totally at ease in what was an unusual role for the pair, who were having only their third outing together. The Rurikon Ford of Lodebrain and Rian Grayling was nearly 7 minutes behind the leaders, but had their eyes on a first podium finish in the SP class.
The Century Racing pair of Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar had done well to move from 20th on the road and 8th among the specials to 4th on the road and 2nd among the specials. Corbett has huge experience in both production and special vehicles and knows exactly what is needed to win races. The only question mark was the reliability of the Century Racing CR2, and with a deficit of 2.5 minutes, Corbett and Balzar were confronted with a tall order. The third Class P running at the front of the specials field were champions Johan van Staden and James Rousseau in the Atlas Copco Bat. With the Class P title done and dusted, the Pretoria-based pair were unlikely to try any late heroics.
The White Star Racing team of Botswana-based driver Keith du Toit and Lesotho-based navigator Ashley Thorne had dominated Class A throughout the race. They were also looking comfortable, and the race cam provides an armchair view of the workings of the front suspension on a modern off-road race car. A workmanlike drive had taken Guy Henley and Warwick Goosen into a solid second in Class A in the Century Racing Bat, and all Cully and Quinton Silwalt had to do was finish in the top 9 among the specials to win the championship.
The father-daughter combination of Coetzee and Sandra Labuschagne led Class B by the proverbial country mile in the race Sonic Zarco. Dion Venter and Ian Palmer were in the same boat in Class D, where the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux was the only vehicle still running with the championship also in the bag. Stand-in driver Manfred Schroeder and Ward Huxtable were comfortably ahead in Class E in the venerable Team Ford Ranger, with Huxtable the co-driver champion-elect.
History was in the making, with Archie Rutherford and Mike Lawrenson marching serenely towards a remarkable triumph in the special vehicle category. There had also been drama among the production vehicles, where Team Castrol Toyota pair Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton were in the lead after the retirement of Chris Visser and Jaapie Baardenhorst, with a broken radiator sidelining the champions. Second among the specials and in Class P were Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar, with the Rubicon Ford combination of Loder Brain and Rian Geiling within touching distance of a first podium finish. Right on their heels were the third Class B crew of Johan van Staden and James Rousseau, with the Ford crew politely doing a little detour to let through the Atlas Copco Bat, who said there's no chivalry in motor racing.
The demise of Visser and Baardenhorst also opened the door for Bloemfontein pair George Barkhuizen and David van Wyk to snatch a first ever podium placing. But the AIM Toyota Hilux was coming under some severe late pressure from Christian de Plooy and Henk Janssen van Vieren in the RFS Toyota Hilux. It provided for a little cameo performance late in the race and came against a backdrop of the Visser-Baardenhorst Toyota being towed back to base.
There was also a little late cameo performance from a clutch of Class A cars led by Keith du Toit and Ashley Thorne. Right behind the White Star Racing Bat with the impressive Guy Henley and Warwick Goosen in the Century Racing entry, and Cully and Quinton Silwalt, who'd done well to work their way through the field from 39th on the road in the morning. The Special Vehicle Championship was all but in the bag for the father and son team, who had the rock-steady Atlas Copco pair of Nick Harper and Kevin Hume breathing down their necks.
Motor racing wouldn't be the same without some eye candy, although crews don't have much time to admire the scenery. A solid performance took KwaZulu-Natal team Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell in the Gibson Racing SVR into the top 8 among the special vehicles. The SVR was sounding a little rough, and there was a sting in the tail for veterans Richard Carolyn and Nick Gosler, with a late puncture in all probability robbing the Men's Health International Zarco of a top 10 finish.
Oh, lekker. Nice, rough, good off-road material. A little bit of fast stuff towards the end, but this through the hills is beautiful.
And now the tire.
First puncture.
Class B leaders Coetzee and Sandra Labuschagne were one of the cars to go past Gosler and Carolyn, and there was a great deal of serious racing still going on. Slotting in behind the race Sonic Zarco were Dion Venter and Ian Palmer, who were now in cruise mode in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux. With the Class D championship done and dusted, there was no need for heroics, but behind them, it was still flat out for the Team Ford Ranger of former SA champions Neil Woolridge and Kenny Scholthammer. The Ford veterans were part of the mass start at the back of the field after losing a wheel on the prologue, but had fought back to 13th overall and 5th in the SP class.
Problems on the prologue had also relegated the father and son crew of Nardus and Louis Alberts to the mass start in the Rapsabat. The ever-cheerful Nardus is one of off-road racing's true characters, and out of the car can always be found wreathed in pipe smoke. In the car, he is one of the hardest chargers, and the Rapsabat had picked up a hatful of places. On a late charge was Swaziland driver John Thompson, who was partnered by stand-in co-driver Chris Davies in the Zarko Magnum, and Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson, who were up to 7th overall in the production car category after a steady day at the office. It had also turned out to be a better day for Jacques Wheeler and Danny Stassen, who put their riverbed woes behind them to eke out a solid midfield finish in the Lab 88 bat.
At the ripe old age of 68, Bodo Bertelt was the oldest driver in the race and has been racing for more than 40 years. Along with Philip Husselman in the hot seat in the Atlas Copco bat, the veteran Bertelt was another of the mass starters to come up with a very good race result. Behind them, Manfred Schroeder and Ward Huxtable were still in charge of Class E in the Team Ford Ranger, with Bez Besaidnout and son Etienne running around 10 minutes behind the Labuskaghnis in Class B. The Besaidnouts were being chased by Herman and Wichard Sulwart, who had a day to forget in the Sulwart Racing SVR, and the same could be said of Duncan Foss and Rob Howie, who managed to salvage a couple of points after a spirited lap 2 showing.
Despite problems on lap 2, Malcolm Koch and Johan Berger will have been satisfied with their SP class debut. The pair showed plenty of promise and could turn out to be a force with which to be reckoned next season. There was also another steady drive from Gerald Leroux and Willem Pretorius in the Rubicon Racing Ford Ranger, with the pair finishing second in Class E. They edged out mass starters Picky Labuskaghni and Rikus Erasmus, but third in class in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux was enough to give Labuskaghni the Class E Drivers' Championship.
There was also a gutsy performance from Northern Regions Championship regulars Barry Drenth and Natasha Miller, who refused to throw in the towel in the ultimate 4x4 Toyota Hilux. David White's Class A debut, though, ended on the back of a trailer, while Congolese visitors Eduardo and Ricardo Argazi also saw at the distance in the Dakar Rally Spec Zarko Magnum. Another team who refused to throw in the towel were brothers Keith and Andrew Machanete, who grabbed the final podium place in Class B.
Back at Tarleton International Raceway, a trio of Class P cars were putting the finishing touches to a slice of ABSA Off-Road Championship history. Archie Rutherford and Mike Lawrenson, Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar and Johan van Staden and James Rousseau produced a stunning 1-2-3 result, unprecedented since the introduction of Class P into the National Championship.
Behind the Class P trio, Anthony Taylor, who grew up just down the road from Tarleton, and Robin Houghton scored back-to-back RFS Magalies wins for Team Castrol Toyota, with first ever podium places for Lodebrain with Rian Greyling in the Rubicon Racing Ford Ranger, and George Barkhuizen with David van Wyk in the AIM Toyota Hilux.
At the finish, there was a final flourish from Archie Rutherford and Mike Lawrenson, and brandishing the checkered flag was off-road racing legend Hannes Grobler from the RFS team. Region Racing supporters were a little quiet, and there was also a very subdued finish from Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar and Johan van Staden and James Rousseau, who were separated by only 10 seconds in the final results.
There was a little more spark from the three crews when it was time to spray the traditional champagne with a prologue victory and a faultless race, adding up to an amazing performance from Archie Rutherford and Mike Lawrenson.
You start up front, it's a big advantage, but the secret today was no punches. Didn't get out the car once, followed the route, and I think that saw us home.
A results panel for the history books, with 3 Class P cars at the top of the class. A 4th Class P car also made it into the top 10, along with the Labuskaghnis in Class B.
The overall Special Vehicle Championship and Class A title was wrapped up by Cully and Quentin Sulwart.
It was an unbelievable season, and doing it with my son once again, what a pleasure and what a privilege that I had. Tough in the beginning. We didn't do the first one for personal reasons, and then the second one, Leidenburg, we had a prologue, and after the prologue we couldn't finish the rest of the race. And then from there it just went from strength to strength. So we are very lucky. We really had a good season, and I think Elegant Fuel has got something to do with that.
The final championship positions with just 3 points between first and second, with Class P crew Johan van Staden and James Rousseau an impressive third overall. It was a close call for third and fourth, with 4 Class P crews in the top 10.
A large crowd had gathered at the finish, with local lad Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton giving the Team Castle Toyota squad their second win of the season. 2 Free State crews joined Taylor and Houghton on the podium, with Rokon Racing pair Lodebrain and Rian Grailing the Ford meet in a Toyota sandwich, with George Barkhuizen and David van Wyk third in the AIM Toyota Hilux.
For Taylor and Houghton, it was a second win in a row on the RFS Magalies 400, with both Free State crews on the podium for the first time.
Yeah, look, I don't know if it's hometown advantage, but it has been good to me. It's the second year in a row that I've won it now, and I must say I had a great car under me today. We had a few little hiccups out there. The first loop and the second loop we had a bit of a misfire, but fortunately we had a big enough gap to hold off low.
The production vehicle results were dominated by SP Class cars, with a lone Class D entry and a lone Class E car making it into the top 10.
At the end of a tough season, privateers Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst in the RFS Toyota Hilux ended more than a decade of factory team dominance in the production vehicle category.
Yeah, I must say this year was very good for us, actually the whole year. When we started out in Darling this beginning of this year, we won that event, and it was a good beginning for us. So we just built on that and tried to finish every race and tried to finish well. Unfortunately, we haven't finished today, but that's how it goes.
The final production vehicle championship table, with Toyota, BMW, Ford and Nissan teams all finishing in the top 5.
In the prestigious South African Manufacturers Championship, a runaway win by more than 400 points for Toyota South Africa. Second were Ford, with Nissan third and BMW fourth.
There was one more award to be made, with a team of the event accolade going to the MMC medical contingent, with a cheque for 5,000 Rand from ABSA being donated to Sunfield Homes.
I think Sunfield Homes, our choice of charity. It's also a charity that's supported by the off-road racing, and I think that's a good choice for us to go with.
For more than 20 years, the off-road fraternity has hosted a Christmas party for Sunfield Homes for children suffering from Down syndrome. Before lunch and a puppet show and a visit from Santa, the children are treated to rides in off-road cars on a specially laid out 4-kilometre track.
The Christmas party is a joint venture with Rotary Merlin's Club, based in Roodepoort, with funds raised going towards building a frail care centre at Sunfield Homes.
This year, the off-roaders were joined by a contingent from the Harley-Davidson Club, and the kids were also treated to rides on the Tarleton Drag Racing Strip.
When all the sums had been done, the off-road community had outdone itself, and a record 93,000 Rand was raised for people in desperate need of specialist care. Well done.